Hello Pilates, and we are going to do a video today about, again, axial stability. We've done a supine abdominal, I've done a supine abdominal video previously. This one is going to be dead bug, so adding shoulder flexion to that hip extension and flexion work. And then we'll take it onto hands and knees and discuss in quadruped on hands and knees the same kind of similar points, areas of focus to keep our attention on so that we are really finding that fundamental action of stabilizing from the pelvis kind of to the shoulder and mobilizing at the hip and the shoulder without disrupting the stability of the core. So let's start laying on your back. We're going to start with dead bug. When we're on our back, we'll have the knees bent, feet flat on the floor, and we have feedback for the back of the head, ribs, and sacrum on the mat. So we're in our neutral spine, breath of air under the low back. And just take a moment, big breath there, inhaling into the ribs, and an exhale to ground those 3 points of contact. Taking another inhale, we'll exhale, wrap the seatbelt around the low waist without imprinting the spine, so just gathering that corset feeling of the abdominals. And then we're going to inhale to float the right leg into your tabletop. And we're going to add the float of the left arm. So right arm, left leg are going to stay on the mat for a moment, pressing into the floor through those appendages on the floor to help stabilize. And then keeping the shape, the exact same, or keeping the spine, the exact same shape, we're going to inhale the arm overhead as the leg reaches out. And I'm only going to go into shoulder flexion, hip extension as far as I can avoid the tail anterior tilting, or kind of pelvis anterior tilting, the pelvis tilting away from me, or the ribs floating off of the mat. So we want to avoid increasing extension in the spine. So that was kind of too far, too low with the arm and leg. Inhaling to reach long, I'm only going to go out as far as I can keep all of this the same. And then we exhale, gather back in, and only coming in as far as you can maintain neutral, so avoiding imprinting as we come in. One more time on this side. Inhale, reach long. Exhale, pull in. Float that arm and leg down, and then float the other side. Left leg, right arm. We stack the knee over top of the hip, wrist over top of the shoulder, and then again, we reach and then draw to center, only going as far as you can keep that breath of air under your low back the same shape. We're going to float the arm and the knee up, and then we're going to add the float of the other two appendages. So everything is floating. We're staying stacked. We're in a neutral spine. And then we find the lengthening of left arm, right leg out from center. Sometimes the hardest part is not moving the stable arm and leg, and then float back in, and then switch to the other side. So having all of the appendages floating in space kicks it up quite a bit. So maybe you take the leg not as far down. You can always go a little higher to make it a little bit more manageable for abdominals. And then we'll end right arm, left leg, I think. So coming back to center, hug the legs in for a moment. So doing your best to maintain neutral through that whole series. Neutral, the natural curve of the spine, is where we'll be the least compressed in the spine as we do that stability of the spine and moving at the hip and shoulder joints. If it feels in that dead bug float, that curling the tail under, coming into imprint, and moving from there helps to fire abdominals and supports the low back more. I'm okay with you choosing imprint, but as you reach long, we want to avoid coming out of imprint and then coming back into imprint as we come in. So finding that stability of the spine and maintaining it as the arms and legs float in opposition. We're going to come up, swing the legs around, and come onto hands and knees to do basically the exact same thing, just in quadruped, on our hands and knees. So hips right over top of the knees, hands directly under the shoulders. And we're gonna get set up here, be kind of picky about our setup because I teach quadruped hands and knees a lot, and I want you to make sure that in this fundamentals, we've set ourselves up well. So as we add complexity or difficulty, we have a solid base of support, solid foundation. So in this position, it might not feel great on your wrists. You can always bring the hands a little further forward or roll up your mat to have the heel of the hand a little higher than the knuckle, if that feels better for your wrists. Wherever feels best for your wrists, I want you to lift your heart away from the floor, and you're gonna find a soft bend at the elbows, and then from the shoulder, try to spiral the points of the elbows straight back versus wide to the side. So we spiral the elbows back, and then I'm actively ripping my mat in two to get that base of the armpit to turn on. So we've got a really active upper body, and then I want us to keep stabilizing through the arms. We're gonna do a little bit of breathing. So inhaling into the belly, let the belly fall. And then exhale, gather the abdominals up and in, avoiding tucking the tail under as you come into that gather. So maintain those 3 points of contact, head, back of ribs, back of sacrum, on that imaginary floor, or you can imagine there is like a dowel or a stick along your spine. You're going to keep those 3 points of contact. Let's do that one more time. Breathing in, and then exhale. Gather the belly up, keeping the sit bones wide, tail untucked. Then from here, with as little shift of the weight as possible, let's inhale, just reach the right arm overhead, and exhale, lower down, and then left arm overhead and lower down. So that might be enough. We can keep it in the arms. If that feels like that's staying pretty stable, low back is happy, we'll do the legs. So taking an inhale, exhale, wrap the belly, reach the right leg behind you with as little shift of the pelvis to the left, as little opening of the hip towards the right as possible. And then if that feels okay, use the glute and hamstring to float your leg up. As the leg floats, we only go as high as we keep it in the hip extending, out of low back extending. And then we lower back down. Taking an inhale. Exhale, wrap the belly. Float the left leg behind you. And then again, if you can keep the hips square, we float the leg, avoiding opening up the hip or shifting the weight to the right. And then again, only lifting as high as you can avoid the low back doing the lift of the leg. So it's glute and hamstring right underneath your butt crease floats the leg up. Bringing everything down, reset up, get the weight even through the 4 points of contact on the mat. And then we're gonna, if it feels okay, put it all together in your oppositional reach. So right arm, left leg, reach long. As you find the float, we wanna make sure we don't start to sink into that left shoulder, lift up and out of the left arm. And there's as little shift of this center line to the right as possible. If that feels like a good challenge, you can stay there or lower back down. If you wanna challenge that abdominal, you can float the right toes. So a little add-on, not quite a fundamental. Adding the toe is surprisingly challenging, and then lowering all the way down, and then keep that weight even through the 4 corners, resettle the weight, left arm, right leg reach, only lifting as high as you can keep the spine stable, lifting up and out of the right arm, and then maybe we find, flow to the left toes harder on this side. It's an option, and then lower everything down. So coming to a high kneeling, coming off of the wrist. If a child's pose feels better for you, just take a moment there. So with both of those, same action, same goal of stabilizing from kind of the whole torso. And it's amazing how much strengthening happens through the core, how much stabilizing it has to do when we don't compensate and move through the spine, but only move through the hip joint and the shoulder joint. So I hope that video is helpful. It's probably a movement a lot of you have done before. If you have questions or comments or anything to say, please leave me a comment. And if you liked the video, if you're interested in more videos from me, I'd love for you to subscribe. I will see you next time. Bye.